Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith, and I'm here with
Jim Groom.
Jim Groom. We are on our fourth picture in the generational conflict series that we've been doing here. And, you know, what's interesting, these are stories of basically adult children managing their relationships with their much older elderly parents for the most part. And what I'm discovering, which is so interesting about this, is the intentionality of moving through actual generations of films, like the first being 1937's Make Way for Tomorrow, Tokyo Story, 1953. Those two are very much stories about and by the greatest generation, if you will. You know, so they were that. But then we did on Golden Pond last week. And even though it's about, quote unquote, a greatest generation, and it was a love story. And all three of them had these wonderful relationships that had sustained decades, right?
Yeah.
But Jane Fonda was very much about Jane Fonda ultimately, and it was her. I love how we came to this point of like it was this performative reconciliation with her true father, Henry Fonda, who plays her father in the film, and the conflict that is. But this film, this is our generation's perspective. This is Billy Jr. finally gets his moment 26 later. Billy Jr. is the wisecracking bullshit is a good word, who gets to talk about what it's like to come from a family of dysfunction that is not waxed poetically about and snap out of it. You got to just live with this. This is harsh and not fun. And we're doing The Savages, our second Tamara Jenkins film.
Yeah,
from 2007.
The only thing I didn't believe about this film is that the boomers ever get old and give up any power or money or die. I don't think that's true. It has not proven true.
Well, no, you have to realize these are the poor boomers. So of course they die, right?
Oh,
and so,
okay.
you know, this is, we're talking about Laura Linney, who plays Wendy Savage, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays John Savage, as, you know, two older siblings that are quite estranged themselves. And they're forced into a situation where they have to care for their father, who now has dementia, who's lost his life partner while he lived with her at this Arizona retirement community. And what's interesting is this is the seeds of this story were in Tamara Jenkins' first film, which we did, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which was kind of semi-autobiographical story of her and her sibling brothers living in this awkward life, nomadic life near Beverly Hills, just staying just in front of, you know, the landlords that were trying to kick them out of shitty apartments as they tried to stay in the good Beverly Hills public school district. And Alan Arkin, who plays the father in that, who's much older, as was in real life Tamara Jenkins's a much older father, who's was like a sharp, like he ran a casino or something. And Alan Arkin's character has no money, nothing to speak of, and to keep himself together, and he's attaching himself to a wealthy kind of partner that wants him to move in.
It's funny you say that because obviously there's a crossover with this film, but when the film started, and I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but when we first see...
No, this is fine.
When we first see Lenny Savage, played by Philip Bosco, he's eating cereal and he's looking down and he's in his underwear. And the opening to this movie is amazing with these old cheerleaders coming out of the bushes. Yeah. It's just, oh my God, what an amazing opening. I just loved it. But anyway, we cut to them. We're in Arizona, Sun City. It's a huge kind of retirement like world, not even community, not even village. Right. It's like a world of retirement. And he's sitting there in his underwear eating, you know, some sort of wheat cereal. And then he gets into a fight with the caretaker of his girlfriend. But for a second, I was like, oh, wait, is that an old Alan Arkin? Like there, I really thought for a second, like even Alan Arkin was still playing that role, just like 10 or 20 years later, you know what I mean? So to your point, it really felt like a continuation on the slums of Beverly Hills.
Yeah, and it was interesting because like Tamara Jenkins did an interview on Fresh Air as she had, 10 years earlier for Down and Out in Beverly Hills. Sorry, Slums of Beverly Hills. I keep making that mistake. Sorry, Slums of Beverly Hills, and you know, um, in the interview, she didn't even recall that she had talked about this, the kind of semi-autobiographical background that she had literally done a similar thing, had to take her father on the airplane and how hard she didn't realize that was gonna be as, caring for someone who can't care for themselves. And that's a very big part of this. But to kind of wrap up, like, there's not a lot of production. This was an indie film. Tamara Jenkins is interesting because, she does The Slums of Beverly Hills in 1998, and I think it was adored by the indie community, like, in the Sundance kind of world that it was. And it takes her 10 years to pull off getting another feature film
Wow.
going,
So this is her
you know?
next film after that?
Yeah. She in an interview I was reading, she had spent a couple years on another project, that wasn't her something she wrote, and they took it away from her, and it was pretty devastating, like losing 2 years of your time and effort, to have it just go away, and it was really about, she was really struggling to get financing for this film. Unsurprisingly, it's not the kind of film people are going to like expect to make a lot of money. And it's because, Philip Seymour Hoffman and Laura Linney are attached, but Philip Seymour Hoffman wins the Academy Award
Ah,
for
Truman.
Capote
Yeah,
in
that's right.
2005. And it's because of that, they're like, okay, go ahead, make it. And it still was an indie film. They had 30 days to shoot 120 pages, which is like psychotic. And Laura Linney in an interview talked about how it was like, felt like 5 years because it was just so much. It was very hard. And there's this wonderful like artifact of that era, movie phone. Hello and welcome to movie phone. Back when they were a company that, had some influence on the Hollywood community, they used to do this like series. I had never seen an episode of this where called Unscripted, where the two actors basically look at these monitors of prompts of questions from fans, and they just kind of navigate an interview with just the two of them. It was really weird.
How cool.
Um, yeah, and it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But the thing that was great about it is there's a moment where what was the question? About it was about working, as an actor, and how important chemistry is between the two characters. And Hoffman was describing how when he was younger, he's like, it doesn't really matter. You're an actor. You got to pull it off. You're gonna be fine. But then he understands that no, that's as he got older, and he talked about a few other things about getting older and changing his thoughts about acting a bit. And he just starts talking about how he and Laura Linney meshed so well, and Laura Linney is just fucking beaming as he's talking, and you can
Mhm.
tell they had a real kinship. And Tamar Jenkins mentions that as well. It's always heartwarming when you hear like actors really like feeding off of one another and believing in each other and it making a difference versus like what Henry Fonda said, I'm not that kind of actor, kid, I don't need to see your eyes. Just like
Totally.
such a diss to his daughter. And so there's not a lot because it's such a small film. And it is cool to just kind of find these glimpses. It's very much a character piece. It could have been a play easily, this film, I think. You can imagine having like the retirement home as being the nursing home as being a set, and then some other rearrangements done, and these three characters for the most part being most of it. And even in the last one, I'll say, is Tamar Jenkins spoke about the casting of Philip Bosco, and why he won the role is his willingness to try to not play for sympathy in his character, and it be this like honest, blunt, brutal character. And she spoke specifically about how in the diner scene, which is like the only family meal, which is so odd,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no
It's
food even. It's like before
no,
the
there's
meal
no
comes.
exactly. And he says something to the effect of like, because they're asking, it's all logistics, and we're going to talk a lot about this. Everything it's a procedural. Like I was watching it was like almost like I'm watching a procedural, like a police procedural. It's like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. There's very little emotional connection going on between the characters. They're just reconciling with their own shit and what's the next task I have to do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And so Philip Bosco came in for his audition, and he could have played that line like it's like where he learns like he's not in a hotel, he's in a nursing home, and he doesn't look for sympathy. He's just like, this is fucking shit. And so she loved him. Anyway, so to the story, and you're back to the opening of the Arizona retirement community, and it feeds into this first kind of, I think, major theme as like the elderly being infantilized and becoming children again. And there's this lovely opening as you described it. There's the older cheerleaders / tap dancers. You can't tell what they're coming out of the bushes. And there's golf, and there's aquatic yoga, and there's bocce and tandem bikes and golf carts everywhere. And it seems so beautiful and like, oh, idyllic retired life is wonderful. But then as you described, we cut to the inside of one of these homes, where there's a old man in an underwear. His girlfriend of 20 years is kind of checked out. You don't know how she's doing at all.
Yeah, she's pretty much gone.
And an aide's taking care of her. Like his job is to take care of her, but he lives there, and he is a complete asshole to him. Like, I don't flush the toilet for you. Get up and go flush the toilet. And he's like, dude, what the fuck, man? I'm just eating cereal. And he's like, and then at a certain point, he's like, are you cleaning up after yourself, Mr. Savage? And this is the beginning of this portrait of what it's like to be someone who's old and doesn't have the ability to completely take care of themselves.
Yeah, but
it's kind of terrifying.
But and there's a couple of things in that opening that I think was really well done. Is obviously they make the point that he's the caretaker of the girlfriend. He in many ways is just a freeloader who's there. And like, that's why the guy gets pissed off. He's like, I'm supposed to be taking care of her, and now I got to flush after you. And, and he takes his cereal away from him. And then he gets really pissed, like, that son of a bitch. And then he goes into the bathroom, and in a kind of vindictive, almost like that sense that you're saying that for me really works, is like this infantilization of the old people. And then these kind of very like, how would you say, these 30, 40s, like age, who are kind of just paying lip service to them and are doing a job. And, they're not family. They're not there to take care of them in that way. They're just doing what they have to do. This guy's so pissed off and so tired of the whole thing. He doesn't flush, but he actually war paints the wall, with his fecal matter, as we learn later on. And it's a very disgusting scene. I have to say, I was like, oh shit, what am I in for with this movie? Right? His hands are all brown. It's all on the wall, and he wrote prick. So that's what he writes to get back at the aide. And like the poor aide, at the same time, you could see his situation, like probably making next to no money. And like you start to see the whole industry of it all. The industry of getting old, the industry of taking care of the old, and how what should be like some sort of, sentimental relationship amongst people has simply become transactional, and in all the worst ways. And it's interesting, and she does it really well right from the beginning, puts you there. And like you said, then you start to just go through the procedures trying to figure out where those emotions are.
Yeah, and it's kind of relentless at the beginning too, because we have Wendy, who receives the first call back in her apartment in New York City, and she's freaking out and calling her brother up in Buffalo, John, who's Seymour Hoffman, And there's this lovely, really intentional piece of symbolism where he's like trying to tell her, like, calm down. This is only an orange. This is an
We're at
emergency situation. And she's
orange.
like, we're at orange. She's like, no, we're at yellow. We'll deal with it when it turns red. And then immediately later, it cuts to her, to Doris, the Lenny's girlfriend, getting her nails done in red, and she dies. And
That's awesome.
It becomes the undoing instantly, where suddenly he's going to get kicked out of the house.
There's also the context too. Yeah, it does go to red. You're right. There's also the context too that those colors only mean anything post 9/11, right?
Oh,
when you
right.
start to go into, TSA after, the Twin Towers, and it's like wearing code orange. Like everything was a code there. We were all in some kind of, fear and loathing, which I think also is another part of the context here. And she does a really good job of capturing that without kind of spelling it out in the same way. So you have that symbolism, which is great. But I think really the underlying part of that, we're at yellow, we're not orange yet, we may get the red, is like where we are culturally post 9/11.
Yeah. And so when things start flashing red, it means like siblings are forced to like upend. And this is kind of a core of where I think, you and I are at our life, and why this is kind of a really kind of cuts close to home sort of piece of story is we've both spoke off camera to one another about like, this is what we're going through with our lives and our parents or our partner's parents and in various situations. And it really is upsetting to you in your life. You're like, oh, fuck, this is bad, and you're trying to deal. But then you, at the same time, the way that Tamara Jenkins presents what the Lenny is dealing with as the proxy here as your parent, as she and her brother have to sort out what they're going to do, and they see him in the hospital for the first time, and he's literally fucking strapped down because he's been difficult. And they're like, where the fuck have you guys been?
Like, you're not a real doctor.
Yeah.
He's a PhD, like, Dad.
Yeah.
And that was the best.
You mean like Broadway? No, the theater. What is it? The Theater of Social Unrest.
Exactly. Bertolt Brecht, it was a big theme in this movie too.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is Tamara Jenkins, who's finding this really, really, really dark humor. This is, because it is. If you just look at it without, unblinkingly in a hospital room, like bright lights with like bad television on that nobody is watching and the buzzing of the lights. And it's just kind of, it's such a harsh new world that suddenly he's thrust into.
And that OxyClean commercial, which is the commercial they were doing as an OxyClean, is like whenever I go back to Long Island and I go into someone's house or whatever, like that TV's on, the commercials for the pharmaceuticals. Like when I went back, like here's a perfect example of what you're talking about. We're sitting here and we're getting ready to do a Family Pictures podcast, the best podcast, I might say. And so I'm sitting here and my sisters are emailing me like, look, Dad's not good. Dad doesn't seem really good. And I'm like, I'm sitting here in Italy, 4,000 miles away from New York where I have to go. And they're like, Jimmy, we think you should come home. And I'm like, right? Like, I should be like, oh my God, my dad, I got to get on a plane the first thing. And I did, but it wasn't like, I wasn't fucking O.J. Simpson running through the running through the I don't know if you can use that connection with Simpson anymore, right? No, that's not very good. Yeah.
By the way, this is like a luggage commercial from the 80s or late 70s.
It's Hertz car rental.
Oh, it's a Hertz. It's a car rental commercial.
That's right.
Jesus.
So, and it was great. But anyway, that's how I remember O.J. until obviously.
Yes.
But anyway. That's that sense. It's like everything you're doing. It's like, okay, I got to put it on a hold, kind of like Philip Seymour Hoffman in the Arizona airport talking to his colleague, like, we're going to be doing a class on, theater of the absurd. Is there any way you can kind of
Oedipal Rage and Beckett. That was the one. Yeah, can you take my my 5 o'clock edible rage and Beckett class? You
So
know, it's like,
wonderful. I love it.
uh,
Anyway, that's my little story for you.
yeah, yeah. And so, these logistics are just kind of hammering you, and and again, this is the controlling of the care as control, and literally it's physical control. He's tied down because he's been difficult. And it continues how he's literally tied up, after they, John and Wendy negotiate the situation. John goes off ahead to try to find a place for him back in his town of Buffalo. I wonder if he's like at SUNY Buffalo too. I think
He
that would be
gotta
the
be,
kind of
right?
place that, yeah, that would be my guess for sure. And she's to stay behind and be with him. um and so, which means, more importantly, she has to transport him. And the way that, like, they push him down the jetway, and it's like the airport attendant is just like, just bullying him through. And then they put him on another wheelchair, and they literally strap him down, so because it's a narrow wheelchair that you can drag through the aisles. And it's just such harsh, grim reality. No one's helping. No one gives a shit about
No,
you and your old man. And
no.
it's like, and that's the reality of it. It's like the notion of aging gracefully as presented in the opening scenes. It's a bunch of bullshit. And it continues too, because later on, and this is okay to briefly jump ahead, when they see, when Wendy, she feels incredibly guilty about the situation of the nursing home they put him in. And it's like, imagining, like, we can get him into a better one. There's better, like, there's this other idea. And she's watching these VHS tapes, like,
Best.
of, that are these also fictions of, like, how it's just so wonderful, but it all just collapses, right? It's just, caregiving is just a bunch of fucking logistics. That's what it really is,
It's true. And I I I have watched it again and again. I've probably been through the series now 4 times. The Sopranos spends a ridiculous amount of time dealing with Tony and his mom, and then
Yeah,
Paulie's mom in this high-end nursing home. But still, in the
yeah,
end, it's just a nursing home. It maybe has a
yeah,
very different appeal than we see the one in this, but it's very interesting. Like, you know,
yeah,
I think Sopranos is one of the first ones that is kind of a contemporary look at, this generation trying to deal with their aging parents that I can think of, as we move around this time on. There's probably others I'm missing entirely, but Sopranos would be a very interesting look in this regard, with Tony and his mom and Carmela and that
yeah,
whole relationship. But it's all based on that vision of the nursing home, like you're saying. This kind of, this
right.
is the perfect nursing home. And as alluded to in this one, that's as much for the kids as it is for the
Yeah,
parents. You know what I mean?
yeah. John being the PhD, deconstructs shit, like, instantly in front of his sister, and, like, is incredibly brutally harsh about it. It's like, it's not for him, it's for you to assuage your guilt. You're the consumer in this situation. And then he goes on, and he's like, right inside that beautiful building right now, it's a fucking horror show. People are dying. That's all it really is.
So
It's really death and piss and shit. And it's
it's
like,
gaseous,
you're
he
like,
says. It's
yeah,
gaseous. I'll tell you another story here, because this is all, like you said, we're going through this. This is all fresh. My dad lived with
yeah,
my sister for, most of his, he died when he was 87. So since he was like 60. So yeah, no, or 70. But, she took care of him. She's a nurse. And, it started to get to a point where that was impossible. So the last 6 years of his life, he went into a nursing home. And we used to go pick him up, and I would travel back there somewhat regularly, and we'd go pick him up. And then my brothers and sisters, which I have many, would call me, and they're like, how's Dad doing? He's like, all he keeps yelling is, it's a boneyard in here. It's a boneyard. Everyone's dying. What have you done to me? It's hysterical. So I think of what he's saying, the Philip Seymour Hoffman character, John,
yeah.
and then what my dad says, because my dad was
Yeah.
convinced, like, all this is, a charnel house. Like, I'm going there
Yeah.
to die. And that's
Yep.
serial. And I think Philip Bosco, with the figure of Lenny, plays the dad so well, in
Yeah.
that he's kind of absent, right? He's kind of
No.
there, not there. And there's some real truth to that, at least me dealing.
Yeah.
My dad didn't have dementia, but at a certain age, part of you just starts to check out.
Yeah, and that was very much like intentional, as I mentioned. Like Tamara Jenkins was not, as she just said it, she didn't want a cutification of like the difficult old man,
Yeah.
right? And find some sentimentality in that situation and make them sympathetic and help the medicine go down. These are, I'm quoting her now,
Yeah.
and she just wanted to be very honest and blunt, and it is. It's
It
very
is.
brutally blunt. You know.
Well done, really, in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. And so on to kind of, we've kind of alluded to what's interesting is we had introduced John and Wendy as they kind of are attacking this crisis. And their situations as they're introduced is what's so wonderful and reminded me so much of like our generation and being a Gen X. We have um, Wendy, who's clearly something of a temp, right? She's working in a cubicle office.
Yeah.
And John is also, he's an academic. He's a PhD in literature or something, in drama. But he's in like the boneyard. He's in his own boneyard, right? It's like where academics go to freeze to death in Buffalo,
He's in Buffalo. Yeah.
and he's in, and this the angst of our generation. This like, I made me just think about this is the work you have to do until you do finally get to do the real work, right? This idea, this fiction that we were bred to believe in, which was go after your dreams, do that thing you believe in, and it will come and it'll be fulfilling work. And it'll somehow, you didn't even think about like the notion that it had to sustain a life as an adult, right?
Yeah, like you actually have to pay bills, and there will be student loans, and they'll have interest and all these weird things. But I mean, yeah, I mean, speaking of someone who kind of did an English PhD but didn't finish, and even as I
Uh-huh.
had to take my family, Antonella and I took our kids, which were born right around the time of this movie, and then we went down to Virginia, and the idea was we were trying to just survive. But I was here 32 years old, and I was like, still gonna work on that PhD. I'm like going into my like 10th, 11th year of the PhD, and finally I had to come to Jesus, and I was like, this is not gonna happen. Like I have to fucking survive. I'm making no money. I'm a fucking ed tech. Like I gotta do something. And I'm deep in my 30s now. Like
Yeah.
I completely feel this. So like when you see the figure of Laura Linney and she's kind of working on her grant application as she's a temp in some cubicle, it's like,
Yeah.
absolutely. I completely related to that. And you talked about temp jobs in New York and how 90s that was, which is
Yeah,
when we were in
exactly.
New York. And I have some stories there. I worked for Univision as a kind of like executive assistant, like whatever. Like they were like, make a PowerPoint. Do you know how to use a computer? Make a PowerPoint for me. Do you know how to use Excel? And I made like $20 an hour, and I was like, oh, great. This is easy. But I'm getting no
Yeah.
further with my PhD. I
No.
have no 401k. I have no like retirement. I'm going to end up like Lenny.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is like there's two parts to it. I think it's like we were part of this overeducated generation, right? To do this kind of labor. My labor was I was in Boston at the time, and I was getting in an MFA. And the funny thing is, there's this wonderful line by Laura Linney's character when she's about to try to sleep with her lover who's married, and she's like, she sees it as such a bullshit and a cliche. It's like, I have an MFA. This is such a cliche. And I was like, my cliche was like, I was working for a moving company while getting my MFA. I wish I was working in a video store because that would be even a better cliche. But, as I'm trying to get my film degree and become a filmmaker, let's see how that worked out. No, I'm just podcasting about movies with Jim Groom.
Exactly.
Who's
12
also not living-
subscribers. We're truly Generation X.
We're killing it, Jim. This is the real work we're doing now.
They're all sellouts, those people. That's awesome.
But, yeah. And so, but it is interesting because ultimately, in that era, there is this idea that even though the work that you're doing in the moment is so stupid, silly, you think this is going to allow you the time to think about and care for the real work that's to come. But it does, life just gets in the way, as you described with you and your family. And in this situation, what gets in the way is their father is like basically dying, and they have to, and their mother is not in the picture, and they have to deal with it, because who else is going to deal with it? Are you going to let them just go into the system and be institutionalized? No. And that's a big part of this story, is, kind of the coded responsibility that exists, the idea of obligation, and even in estrangement. And this is what my little personal story moment, because like this is a story of divorce. They don't say divorce, separation, it doesn't matter. We can tell that through glimpses of bits of dialogue, that they grew up in an abusive household. That the John character was literally abused by Lenny, and there's these wonderful expressions that Philip Seymour Hoffman does to showcase this, where when a good example is when Wendy's coming out of the airport, and he's in the car, because you have to stay in your car, otherwise they're going to yell at you and tow it away. And he sees them through the window, and the first shot of him is absolute disgust. He's like, motherfucking fuck, this is like this guy.
Exactly.
And then the second one is one of not like, it's not really empathy, it's a sadness, but it's a reality of like, fuck, he's really fucked. My life is also really pathetic and sad. Even though I have this PhD, he has got this situation. But there's obligation here regardless. And, this happened to my brother and I. My father was estranged from our lives. And he literally was the same thing. My brother calls me up one day and it's like, I reconnected with our father and he's like dying. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Exactly.
Like, are you fucking kidding me? I've like, no, I've had no contact with this human being in 20 years. And it's just craziness. And you're just forced to like, suddenly you're finding this old man that you're like, what's bizarre is you see him and you're just like, holy fuck, that's my father, because he looks just like me,
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. And then you're talking, and then he's like yelling at us at one point because we're talking too loud, and I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
and
we're kids again,
weird.
right?
Yeah.
And you can see that a little bit with them in this, but yeah, please.
No, and so there's two parts. They're kind of blending together. It's this idea of adult siblings, because as much as like they're estranged from their parents and their father in this case, like, because the mother's absent completely, we literally don't know where she is. The siblings are quite estranged too, because they don't have, at first you recognize they have so little in common. And when they first, like that, one of the first moments when they see each other, it's so funny. This is the comedy of it. It's like, and they're arriving at from the airport in Arizona, and like Philip Seymour Hoffman's like, look, and she's like dressing him down visually. It's like, he's like, fine, I gained some weight. And it's like, and he's saying like, let's just stay out of each other's shit. Let's not, like, this is no time to regress. There is no reconnecting. And that's what's so sad about this,
Yeah, although, I mean, at that moment, no. But they do.
At that moment, it does choose. Yeah, they do.
They do connect. And I think the hard part, too, is, like you said, as things happen and you're estranged, the John character even talks about this. One of his big struggles is, he has this girlfriend who happens to be Polish, and he won't commit to her. So there's this kind of sense as her visa's running out and she's going to have to go back to Poland. And even though that's the reality, he won't marry her. And so, like, there's obviously some real issues there about, commitment and his own family and all that. But, like, you see he's talking to her, and he suggests it's nothing. They've been dating for a few years. But you see he's talking to her as they're sharing a hotel room, which I love that detail, right? They both can't afford to splurge for their own.
No, and the way that Philip Seymour Hoffman splays his body on the bed next to his sister, that's only a thing siblings can do. Is just like, you can be in your underwear still, even as adults, because it's your sister. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so, I mean, and he starts to, obviously he's crying about that disconnection, even though he's letting, he's kind of forcing it at the same time. And you start to get a sense of that deep sadness. And slowly the story starts to come about what this impact of this man has had on these kids. And, and that's what really gets interesting. Whereas the other part, you have Laura Linney, who's, in a dead end relationship with a married man in the same building, who she's really kind of dating with so that, she can see the dog, it seems like,
Yeah.
like you don't
Yeah,
even,
Marley.
there's certainly
Yeah,
no like
she's
physical
there's
like attraction.
oh my god, yeah, the bad sex scene where
Oh,
he's like having sex with her and she's just like, her literally she's spacing out and she looks over at the dog and pets the dog while he's having sex with her.
yeah.
It's so funny.
And it's again, like you said, with everything in this movie, even that's very transactional and
Yeah.
procedural. And they're kind
Yeah.
of stuck in this world of that and part of their own doing, but part of also, I felt the sadness of this movie, the black comedy of this movie was how real that seemed to life of the existence we've kind of created for ourselves, in the late, 20th, early 21st century. Like this seemed like, wow, it's a desperate, dark space we've created for people getting old, for people trying to find satisfaction in their love life, for people being
Yeah.
staying together and having relationships. Like, it was not Henry Fonda and, Catherine,
No.
I'm trying to get
Hepburn.
Hepburn, right? It was
Yeah.
not the love story of Tokyo Story, or even of, obviously the
Make
one.
way for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like it was totally different. There were no relationships.
No. No, there's not a single, there's like a glimpse of like, oh, I hope they kiss, moment where, Laura Linney's character is talking to Jimmy, one of the aides at the nursing home. And one of the nice contrasts of in the early, elderly care scenes, like they're very harsh with Linney, but there are glimpses of real humanity in the nursing home through these like the character Jimmy, who's Nigerian, and Laura, Wendy has a conversation with him, and it's that kindness does exist. She just doesn't feel it, nor does her brother, and so it's just they're so disconnected from healthy relationships, and to recognize one is kind of beyond their capacity. And you're right, because as they start to open up to one another and they're playing tennis in a gym floor, which is really funny. and, and John's character gets basically one hand in a ball and he pulls a muscle in his neck, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is just like incredible and everything. And but prior to that, they're talking about like the Polish woman, and he's like, even if we got married, what? She's going to have to get a job at some other stupid university and we'll never even see each other. And she's just like, you're just a fucking idiot. Like, love is love. You're lucky. Like, this is someone you actually like. And she knows, and he's not willing to admit it.
But like
So,
also
yeah.
as a PhD student, for all those years, like that was also part of the reality you were fed. Like
Yeah.
you were going to have to go to, bumfuck nowhere and for a, spend 12 years of your time doing this PhD to make a bullshit salary in the middle of nowhere. Like it was dead end. It was as dead end as everything else in this world.
Yeah. Yikes, Jim Groom. No, I mean, that's our lives. And so, they're making choices themselves as well. And it's one of the, I think, probably toughest moments, is preceding that is like, there is this glimpse of connection between them through the humanities, right? Like she's a playwright. He's someone who is deeply into the weeds of analyzing, the literature of plays and performance. And there's this moment where she shares that she got a grant from a Guggenheim, when he's in traction, and it's this great scene. Like, so he's injured himself in his neck, and they connect this contraption to put his neck in traction so that he can, relax his muscles, and she helps, and they're kind of laughing. And this is the briefness of moments where you feel real connection between them. And he's so proud of her, and he's like, you should stay and we'll have our own mini writers colony. And then and that's it. That's the only moment of real connection in this movie until the very, 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 very end. Because the contrast is when he finds out it was a lie. And this scene is probably one of the harshest of the film, and most important because this is when they truly regress to being siblings that are young and fighting, and just, their trauma as kids is exhibited through their being shits to one another, you know?
Totally turning on one another. And,
Yeah.
obviously there's also jealousies, right? When he thinks she
Yeah.
really got the Guggenheim, as much as he was happy for her, you could see he's like, what? I didn't get it. I applied 6 times. And, like there was
Yeah.
this sense of like, how could you get it? And
Yeah.
she obviously struggles with her own self-esteem and like, how could you think I couldn't get it? Why would you think that? And like all of those kind of deep insecurities, right, that define
Yeah.
us from when we were that age, you're right, start to come up. And, and they come up really like slowly. And the reveal of this movie is so nice because it's not all up front and then it's just tragedy after tragedy. And so that's what keeps
Yeah.
the plot. No, it's like really, like you said, and I think it's such a good word for it that you described this. It's procedural. It takes you through. Okay, we got to get dad into this thing. We got to get him out from Arizona to Buffalo. We got to get him into
Yeah.
a nursing home, and then we got to find an alternative to that nursing home, right? And then oh, we got to come to terms with the fact that this nursing home is the best he's going to do, and there may be
Yeah.
not much more beyond this given his health. Like it is very much going through the paces of like the details of what it is without being able to pull your head out.
No. And it's in this moment when they're fighting, it's like what's so sad about it is it's only siblings that have known each other for so long, or it could also be in a relationship with someone that and it's not going well, or you're just fighting, even if you're in a wonderful relationship with a partner. When fighting happens, it can be brutal, because you know each other too well and you cut each other in the worst, deepest ways. And hopefully, you're not an idiot and that leads to you've done it so harshly and so continually that it leads to resentment and it leads to an end of a relationship. I think we were talking to a psychologist or listening to a psychologist, and as soon as there's like contempt for another person. It was a conversation about couples therapy I was reading about. As soon as there's contempt, the couples therapist is like, it's over. It's like useless to continue, because if you have contempt for someone, there's no coming back from that. There's no like reconciling. And she cuts him like, you're just like him, because the dad's right there in the car. It's like, you're just like him. You never thought I could do anything either. And he's like, why the fuck are you comparing me to dad? Like, that guy's a motherfucking asshole. And he's right next to both of them. And he literally has to check out, and he turns his hearing aid out. And so he's checked out too. And it's pretty rough. But
speaking of siblings,
yeah.
I have a good story for you. So
okay, good.
Because I'm always good for a story. My brother, I go back there, and I've seen my family pretty regularly, even since I've been here. So at some point over the last 10 years, I went with my brother and his family out to an Italian food on Long Island, somewhere in Hicksville. And we went, or maybe not Hicksville, Plain Edge. That doesn't matter. We go and we sit down.
I love it. You should explain Hicksville is an actual town. It's not a euphemism.
Yeah, it is an actual town in Long Island. But you'd get good Indian food there now. Plain Edge is, I think, where we went to get the pizza. And so, we sat down, and he knows the waiter. And so he says to the waiter, he says, come over, right? And my brother's 4 years older than me. And he's like, this is my brother. And the guy's like, hey, nice to meet you. And then he says to him, who do you think is older? Because he knows, because I look a lot older than my brothers. Like DS 106 aged me significantly, and I'm at one with that. But I'm like, you motherfucker, you're gonna put this guy, and the guy was like, he doesn't want to insult him. He doesn't want to insult me. And then this is the real talking shit of siblings to get under, like you're saying, to get under the skin and make you feel it. And my brother knew he had got me. And I mean, respect that he got me, but that still stings. Like, I'm like, this is years ago, and I'm still like, you bastard. So, but not contempt. Yeah. We didn't get to the point of contempt. We did get to the point of motherfucker.
Well, that's the other side of it, is like, if it's healthy, then there are lines that are allowed to be crossed. And that's what I think is part of being close enough to someone, and you can manage it. And I think ultimately, that's where Tamara Jenkins kind of helps us through with this story of this sibling relationship. Like there's these wonderful, because they're the contrast in their approach to their father is just stark.
Yeah.
She, as we've described, is trying to find a better life for him, like put him in a better home, and John's like, this is fucking bullshit, don't worry about it. And even when they first put him in what the original nursing home, and they walk out and she's like, we're horrible, 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 horrible people. And John's just like, dude, man, he doesn't even know where he is. And it's just, and he earlier even said, it's like, we're doing the right thing, we're taking better care of him than he ever did of us, right? And this way they're navigating their obligations to their father is so interesting, because they just have, and Tamara Jenkins talked about this too. It's like, you have two siblings, they're both of the same parents, they grow up in the same household, but they're like little plants, and then they just start to grow, they diverge, and like they're different human beings. And so you're just always amazed, like with my own children, you're always amazed, like, man, they're so different, but at the same time they have these affinities for one another as siblings and share certain traits, but they're so different.
Yeah.
And their differences are really stark in the way they're presented this way, because he's so analytical and she's like latching on to dreaming, even though in reality he's as much dreaming that his Brecht book is going to be something that's super important. And in the way, and talk about like,
she's like, oh, the Brecht book, everybody's waiting for that this holiday season.
And this is example of like, it's an amount of cutting that's just on the edge of not
Just
okay, but
good
it's
enough.
okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. And
that was great.
and this attitude of siblings is really wonderful that way. And so I think it's kind of funny, like it's almost like we're only like
a point though that
ahead.
you made, and I just want to so you have that, but one of the things you start to realize, and this movie does a really good job, is that notion of obligation that you talk about. And one of the things that's really clear from this movie, from the beginning, when Philip Seymour Hoffman is trying to say, well, they were basically dating for 20 years, their common law marriage, like you can't just throw him out because he wants nothing to do with them. And when they're down and out, and that's that whole back to, the slums of Beverly Hills, the sense of obligation becomes acutely apparent because you can't hide it with money. And I think that's one of the things that this movie does pretty well, is show you like money can hide that obligation and hide some of those, psychological damage being done. But when you don't have it, it's that much more apparent to everyone and everything. And I think it makes you that much more acute of what you're not doing for your parents, right? And it's an interesting kind of, I really see her critique not only about like obviously the siblings and the family, but also about, John goes into that capitalist deconstruction of what it's really about, and trying to convince themselves that it's just about the system. It's not like we've done anything wrong. But there's a piece of that, like you have to make that argument when you don't have the money to bail yourself or them out.
No, you can't get the VHS tape or the cheerleader outfits unless you have the cash, right? And he speaks of clearly from the beginning, it's like, this is what Medicaid can pay for. You know, this is what the system allows. And I mean, just a few, because we kind of like skirted through some of the things that Lenny's endured. To back up on another one is like, we mentioned the idea of the only quote unquote family meal they have in the diner, and it's to discuss the details of like end of life care, right? And there's some of the best lines, because Lenny is, or first Wendy is awkwardly trying to bring this up, and John finally takes over and is like, if you're in a coma, what do you want to do, Dad? He's like, why am I in a coma? What are we talking about here? And he's like trying to say, they need to know who. And it's like, that's a question that the home asks. Is like, and that's where what kind of hotel is this quote comes from. Awesome. And he, and this leads to him realizing what it is. He's like, pull the fucking plug, like pull the plug. And then they finally get into the weeds of it, and they're like, so what do you want to have happen when you die? And they're like, what are you guys, fucking idiots? Bury me,
Bury me.
you know?
It's so good.
Yeah. And so there's no like, and that's the other thing about this. Between the children and the father, there's no reconciliation whatsoever.
No.
Like none exists. Like there's no emotional connections being made between John and Wendy and Lenny at all. It's all just procedure. And Wendy is doing her version of trying to express some sort of connection, like buying him lava lamps and nicer lamps and a big red pillow that drives her nuts at one point in the film. And he doesn't care. Like it doesn't matter, though he does care about the lava lamp for a moment, which is cute. And John is like doing his duty by just being there and watching bad movies that include blackface that get them in trouble with the home health aides, right? And the nursing home. And so he's like reconciling, this is all I can do is just be around at least, even though he's like doing his work the entire time while he's there. It's not like there is this, let's talk about that past, Dad. You remember that time when you beat me? Can we figure that out?
For me, I mean, I was convinced by that though, because, you know, unlike On Golden Pond, where it's a big performance of reconciliation, like that's what it's all about. This is for me closer to what my experience was. Like, everyone has issues with their parents. Everyone runs through them, whatever they are, run the gambit, some worse than others, blah, blah, blah. But like, it wasn't like as my dad was coming to his end, it was like, we finally really connected, or there was really that, like, it was kind of like it was when we were kids. And there was always that sense of, I'll never prove, like, or I'll never have enough, or I'll never feel that sense, kind of like we said with Generation X as a kind of trait in general. And I feel like that was, in this movie, it was really true to life, at least for me. What she was suggesting is, that doesn't come. That's just a fantasy, right? It's just the idea. It's a fantasy that you can pay for if you're Jane Fonda and promote, to go on with the next part of your life. Or,
talk about money pays for, a better life.
Exactly. And pays for a very different image of aging and what it like to take care of your parent. Like, of course you can take care of your parent if you throw money at the problem, but it doesn't mean you've actually connected, or just even connecting is not, like you're saying, this great dramatic, like, oh, we reconciled. It's just like sitting next to for example, for me, it was like going to a park in Wantor and watching ducks. My dad's saying nothing, but liking the look at ducks. And that was it.
Right. and that's what, ultimately in On Golden Pond, I mean, and we talked a lot about how the voice of, so much of where we came to this, like it was a performance of reconciliation that Jane Fonda, because she would do these interviews about it. And her dad had died already, because he died like 6 months after the film was completed, basically. And she tells the same story over and over and over again to these talk shows. And you're like, this is a performance. This is, it's not so real. And yeah, that's the big contrast here, because the dad, character in On Golden Pond is like, are you going to come more often? That's all he cares about. Exactly. It's like, you want real reconciliation, you fucking show up. That's how it works. That's how you actually get to know someone. So there is no ability. The time is almost done. He has dementia. So what I think we learn in the picture is the real reconciliation is supposed to be, if possible, between the siblings. Like, can they find connection in their futures? And that's, I think, what Tamara Jenkins is showing some hope in. And like, as I put in our notes, it's like Tamara's not, at least she's not a total sadist, right? No. Because because it does end abruptly, their father's life. Like, he's just suddenly dead, and they go see him in the nursing home, and and they literally, I think, I don't remember which character said it, is like, that's it.
Yeah, no, it was her. It was the sister. Yeah. And that whole anticlimactic nature, and sitting in the room with the body, and just being, and again, that's something I've been through not that long ago. And it really is like, oh, wow, like, that's it. Now it's the after. And I think that, again, another point you just hit on that is proving true for me is it was more an opportunity to connect with my family. And we're not estranged, but to connect with them more regularly and do things. In fact, we have since my dad died, as a kind of reminder that this all goes so fast and then it's
Yeah.
gone. And then you're like, oh, I wish, I wish, I wish. And we're trying to avoid that. You know what I mean? Because like, luckily there's still a lot of good juju amongst us. So it's interesting, you know, that it's like, that is kind of a very small lesson, but a very real one for me.
Yeah. And from the film's perspective, Tamara makes you feel like that's not coming because initially John goes back to his desk on the second floor of his, his house in Buffalo. Um, um, Wendy goes back to her apartment in New York City, and immediately Larry shows up and he tries to equivocate, like, my dog's dying, like his legs don't work anymore, and she just feels so bad, and you worry she's gonna fall right back into that bad habit. And you're like, fuck. But
Yeah.
suddenly we get this 6 months later card, right? And finally they're arriving at the real work. Like, Wendy is actually producing one of her plays. It's in a
Yeah.
small theater, and John is there. John is there watching like a rehearsal. And it's so great because we've learned that John is actually very emotional. Like, we get glimpses of it in speaking of his girlfriend. Like, he's crying on the phone with her. And there's this wonderful moment earlier in the film where the girlfriend just shows up and like it is there when John and Wendy get back from the nursing home, and she gets Wendy gets a moment talking to her by themselves, and it's like, I make him eggs, and it makes him cry, and immediately it cuts to a scene like him eating the eggs and crying, and Philip Seymour Hoffman like crying and eating eggs and then trying to hide it behind eating toast is one of the funniest fucking moments in the whole movie. I just love it. It's like
He's always crying, right, at weird times. Are you crying?
yeah,
Right?
yeah. And so that happens in this film, and we know we've been prepared by Tamara Jenkins that like this is actually real. It's not a false performance of crying.
Yeah.
It's real. It's been set up through engagement, unlike on Golden Pond, where it's a performance. And literally, like, Jane Fonda says, like, I made him cry. Like, it was this
Yes.
act. And it was just a performance rather than a real connection. And we know it's a real connection because of the way that through storytelling Tamara Jenkins sets it up. Whereas on Golden Pond cry moment, it's something we don't even really see. We only know about it because Jane Fonda tells us about it in an interview after the fact.
Yeah.
And so he loves it, and he says so. He calls it really good. And then he shares, like, he's working on another book and he's going to a conference, but then he lets out the conference is in Poland. So we get a sense like, oh, he's trying to do some growing too. But most importantly, they're growing. And the final shot is so fun because Marley's not dead. He didn't let Larry put him down. He's just got real wheels now, and she's running with him, and it's just fucking awesome. And so thank God Tamara Jenkins is not a complete, like, she's a Gen Xer that has like seen some shit, but at least has some soul. Unlike, like, say, Harmony Korine, who's just like, it's all fucking awful,
exactly. Which is very fake
like,
in its own way. It's like the other side of the Jane Fonda fake. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't seen this. This was a recommendation on you, and it kind of really, I hadn't thought about this, and I thought we were going to do the Royal Tenenbaums, so I'd watch that. And when I put this up against the Royal Tenenbaums, I'm like, I've kind of have, my Wes Anderson patience is pretty much at an end, but I really liked Royal Tenenbaums when it came out.
Yeah.
So like I struggled a little bit with this, but like in some ways this film so much more on the target for like a generational, which we've been doing in this small series, looking at generational, like this really, and it's funny, a lot of the Family Pictures podcast, which makes sense, it shouldn't be a surprise, has been about us trying to sort generations, right? Trying to think through from our own perspective, obviously, because we're blinded to that, like our generational relationship to the world and how much that does and doesn't really define you. And I think this did a great job because I read your notes after I'd watched the movie, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. The Gen X thing here was strong for me. And sometimes I just think it's a bullshit term that people rock around like, yeah, latchkey kids, we're the ones who always forgotten. But like sometimes there's things that are real, and this one caught it for me in a viable way.
Yeah, I mean, and God bless Tamara Jenkins for like sticking through 10 years of being sticking to her guns and staying an indie filmmaker, and getting two actors in their pinnacle moment of acting, in Philip Seymour Hoffman and Laura Linney, and then those two connecting and talking about the success of having chemistry as actors. And yeah, these things matter, that they come together, and we're lucky that, and those two actors are obviously of our generation too. And I mean, they didn't speak about that at all. It doesn't come with any of them, this like kind of generational perspective that we're putting on this.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish we could fill that kind of question into those interviews at that time, or even ask them now and see how they will. Philip Seymour Hoffman's dead, sadly, but it is, I love how you're seeing that too. And it's part of what we're learning. Like, we have this quasi film studies class we've built for ourselves in this ad hoc way, but it went from ad hoc, like, oh, let's do that movie, let's do this movie, I mean, these themes are coming up, and then from the themes we're getting these even bigger pictures. And so, man, thanks for doing it with me, Jim.
No, it's a blast. I enjoy it, and this was a great one, so thank you.